Welcome to NFL Daily, where deodorant is optional. I'm Gregg Rosenthal.
You just put me on blast like that. How dare you? I'm coming from practice, man.
So lucky today to be joined by Jourdan Rodrigue, who, it's not weird that you don't have deodorant coming from practice. That's normal. It's just surprising you told me that right before we went on air.
I had to warn you. I didn't want you to start like wilting.
I wasn't gonna smell anything. We're in a big studio, and it's not gonna happen. And even if I did, it happens.
I'm always prepared for any scenario. You should know this. And that includes looping people in. I communicate.
Well, you weren't prepared enough to, bring extra deodorant to practice.
Listen,
apparently.
I was on a mission.
Look, practice, it's still happening out there. Training camps might officially be over for the most part, but the teams are now practicing. They're kind of adjusting, and you're a beat reporter. You work for The Athletic, and you were there at Rams practice. You saw Matthew Stafford back on the field doing individual work. So, these 2 weeks of practice are going to be a little different. Some teams play starters in the third week of the preseason. The 49ers actually are apparently going to play most of their starters for the first time. So some teams do, most teams don't. Teams are getting ready for week one. We're there.
Football is back.
Yeah, you're you're getting there too. I'm excited about today's show. Jourdan, we're going to talk a little later about players that could be changing places. So next week, it'll be on Tuesday, the 27th. I think we're going to release our NFL Daily Show earlier that day to have it right after the cutdown. It's cutdown day. We go from 90 to 53, but over the weekend, as this is all happening, there will be some interesting names that shake loose, maybe some trades. So we'll come up with a few trades.
Yeah, so right now, every NFL building in the league has a team of pro scouts who have been watching all the preseason tape. They've had some pro scouts who have been traveling to preseason road games to what they call advance, so study each other's players, essentially, and also try to get a feel for if that opponent coming down the road, kind of what they're doing, if they're being totally vanilla preseason or if they can glean any sort of information. A lot of things that you can't see on the broadcast, you can see in person, like how they get in and out of the huddle, some of the cards they're holding up on the sideline, those types of things. And so, you go and you have a list of 10 to 15 players who, at certain positions, who, if you decide you're going to part ways with one of your guys, is this other guy maybe an upgrade, and can you go and pick him up out of the cut pool, or would you potentially move for him earlier because you have gotten intel that maybe other people might be moving on that player and they might be ahead of you in the waiver system?
And the tricky thing is, if it was truly a surprise trade, we probably wouldn't be able to guess it, because there have been some pretty big trades at this time of year, right before the season starts. Wasn't that
Kevin Dotson, baby? Woo!
Yeah, that actually ended up being a big move for the Rams, though. They ended up giving him how many $1 million contract because he played so well for them.
This is not going to be good for I cover every team, not just the Rams.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about players that could be changing. We're also going to hit just a few takeaways from my top 50 free agents of 2025, because it's related. The players that are free agents next year are more likely to be traded. And we before we do any of that, we're going to do some news. But I do want to apologize. I guess you said to me, it shows how comfortable you feel with me that you told me about the whole deodorant thing. But I guess that I shouldn't have taken that as an invitation to tell all of our listeners.
I just want to make it very clear. I am wearing deodorant.
Oh, you are?
I did not bring extra in my bag. I want to make that very clear to the listeners. But I will be tamping my arms to my sides for the duration of the show.
Okay, you can check out that.
We've lost a lot of progress today.
In the meantime, let's do some news. This first news item is a quick one, but it's just significant. Justin Herbert's in uniform again.
Love that. Daniel Popper, my colleague at The Athletic, did note that even though he's out at practice, he's not wearing cleats. He's wearing like a turf shoe kind of situation. So probably not fully immersed yet, but ramping him back up.
But out there throwing.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see if he does more than Stafford's just doing individuals now. But that's a good sign. And the Chargers, I think, need to improve their backup quarterback situation. We'll get to that.
Oh, my God. Yes.
A little later. Next in the news, Jayden Daniels officially announced as the Washington Commanders starter. If you're not following the league on a day-to-day basis, you might wonder, wait, didn't that happen the minute they drafted him? But it did not, even though they've basically been treating him as a starter, and he started these 2 preseason games. Dan Quinn did not officially announce it until Monday. Let's listen to Dan Quinn.
I told you about a month ago, That naming our starter at QB wasn't a secret, and it was a process. And when that process was time, I'd know, he'd know, and I'd let you know. And as much as we knew Jayden would get there, Adam and I were most excited about watching how he would. And the how has been absolutely outstanding.
I don't want to just turn this show into a Jayden Daniels love fest every day, because I was a little skeptical of this pick. I thought Drake May should have gone second, and the story is very much yet to be written, but he has checked every box and I think has shown the advantage of being a 24-year-old rookie.
If anything, I was more skeptical of what's around him. I remain skeptical a little bit of what's around him in terms of targets, in terms of the run game, in terms of the offensive line, in terms of the offensive coordinator. You did see
Cliff Heat.
Cliff Kingsbury, you did see him build in some help for the quarterback in that regard. And Jayden Daniels, I agree with you, has ticked every box. The only worry specific to him that I have a little bit is still his frame, continuing to grow into his frame, particularly with some of the maybe protection issues that might come up around him. But you see Cliff Kingsbury actually helping him out with some of what he's building around him in terms of scheme and available targets. Ted Wynn, my colleague, and then Nate Tice, our friend over at Yahoo Sports, noted 4.4 yards average depth of target. So there's a lot of bubble screens happening, a lot of passes to the flat. But that's Cliff when he's making the run game extend into the pass game. So you're still getting the quarterback in a rhythm, but a lot of offensive-minded coaches consider those types of plays as a phase of the run game.
I like when they say that, but I get it. They have to be married, but it's not the run game. You need a good quarterback to help run it. And Jayden Daniels, he gets rid of the ball much quicker than Caleb Williams or probably Drake May, just comparing him to the other two highly drafted quarterbacks. And I think that's going to serve him well behind an offensive line that, on paper doesn't look good. I mean, if I could find tackles that were available, I would try to send them to the Commanders, but there aren't tackles available right now. And so that's something I'm very interested to see to start the season. But Cliff Kingsbury has a history of starting seasons fast, that his offenses in Arizona were almost always at their best, and it was so consistent. It wasn't just random to me. They were always at their best in September for whatever reason. And then I started thinking about that when reading the camp reports that Commanders-Dolphins joint practices, that the Commanders were doing quite well, even though, they don't necessarily have the most talent. So that's something to watch. Speaking of the Dolphins, let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa. He was on the Dan Le Batard show, presented by Meadowlark Media.
Great show.
Speaking with Dan Le Batard, let's listen to Dan ask him a question about the differences in coaching that he's getting.
Can you explain to us the difference in practical terms between having a coach who did believe in you the way that he did, and the difference between that and what was happening with Flores?
Yeah. Well, to put it in simplest terms, if you woke up every morning and I told you you suck at what you did, that you don't belong doing what you do, that you shouldn't be here, that this guy should be here, that you haven't earned this right, and then you have somebody else come in and tell you, dude, you are the best fit for this. Like, you are accurate, you are the best whatever, you are this, you are that. Like, how would it make you feel listening to one or the other? You see what I'm saying?
That's a little snippet of an interview. I recommend people go check out. And it's the Dan Le Batard show with Stu Gatz. You have to say with Stu Gatz.
Top 10 football insider.
His lawyers just go crazy on you. I was curious what you thought of this. You recently wrote about left-handed quarterbacks and Tua, and I know you're familiar with some of the people in that building. Just what a difference it's been between Flores and Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, I can't speak to what it was like before. When I did a piece on the spread of that exit motion, that cheat motion across the league, and I spent some time in Miami last season. And this was right before Austin Jackson got paid. And Tua was at the podium talking about Austin Jackson and sort of made a bit of a reference to what he's talking about here, to the point where it was being chattered and buzzed about a little bit in that media room. I always like to listen to the beat reporters because they are there every single day. And when I come in and do a bigger project and on someone else's beat, I always just like to listen and hear kind of the chatter and the dialogue. And that definitely got people talking about, just kind of this was really one of the first times he's even made a reference to some of the dynamics that he's saying existed before.
I mean, he was
really blunt here, very,
there.
very blunt
And
here.
knowing just what people have said about Flores and how he coaches, yeah, he's hardcore. I think he's like that in real life, that he's going to tell you what you think, and it's hard to speculate, but that was probably with an idea of like making Tua better, but it's a reminder different people are going to develop and improve in different ways, and there are some people that that's not going to work for. And it's like,
I mean, Tua played for Nick Saban, so let's not say that like
right, but Nick Saban maybe has an emotional intelligence to present those sort of ways of motivating and instructing that are productive, and maybe there's another way of doing it which you don't quite understand, like how to relate to other humans. I think Nick Saban has great loyalty from his players because he does it in a way that engenders loyalty.
Well, and you also hear Brian Flores has a ton of loyalty and really high praise from defensive players that he coaches. And so this is not a conversation about that specifically because we weren't there. And at a certain point, Brian Flores will have a press conference because defensive coordinators do, and they do that weekly. And so let's have him say what he wants to say about that instead of putting words in anyone's mouths. However, I will say when I went down there and I did a story on Tua and Mike McDaniel and their relationship, and it kind of stemmed from, Tua was looking at himself in the mirror every morning, and sort of subconsciously the self-talk was, do I suck? And Mike McDaniel heard that self-talk, and it sparked this sort of piece of advice that had nothing to do with sort of the emotional well-being of the quarterback, but actually tied hand in hand, pun intended, with a project that Mike was working on at the time, which was he was trying to figure out how to watch Tua throw as a lefty because it was tripping him up. Because like all of us, it just takes a minute to get used to a left-handed thrower. And so he made this series of clips first for himself that was focused on the process of the throw, not the results of the throw. And so walking through like hundreds of clips from practice, decision-making clips from games, and all of those things. And CBS Sports reported this I think 2 years ago and made reference to it. But it was Mike really digging in on how can I understand how my quarterback throws because I want him to know that I like him for him. And it happened to spark all these ideas and collaboration between the two of them about kind of accentuating the left-handedness, building some of their formations and some of their pre-snap stuff, some of their quick game stuff, the mid-game that they use into like accentuating how Tua throws specifically. And in that way, building with him. That was Mike McDaniel telling him and verbally telling him, but also with his actions, like, I like you for you. I like you for who you are. And Tua says it later in this interview here, great interview with Dan Lebitard.
With Stugatz.
With Stugatz. And he says it. I mean, it took him 2 years to kind of eliminate some of that self-talk, but that was him and Mike McDaniel working together on this like every single day.
That's so forthright and awesome to hear an athlete talk like that, because of course athletes go through those sort of struggles, and there's this idea that like every great athlete needs to be like Michael Jordan, just a killer that shows no vulnerability or no weaknesses. And it shows how comfortable Tua is in the place that he's in, and everything you're talking about of all the things Mike McDaniel went through to try to accentuate his left-handedness and the motions that we're seeing even in this preseason. They're throwing out some new stuff. It just goes to show in football, like so much goes into what makes a player great. And Tua, I think specifically, it's harder for someone like me to understand what is making him so effective because the obvious things, athleticism and arm strength, aren't there in huge abundance, but we're seeing year after year. And at some point, we got to believe that he belongs on the island. He is on quarterback island, and he's staying there for now.
For now, a piece of reporting that didn't make it directly into the article because we have word counts and all that stuff is, sometimes they would be workshopping a play and it would fail 3 times in practice. And Mike McDaniel and Tua would go to Mike and say, I am terrified of messing up. I do not want to mess this up in a game. I don't want to ruin this for everybody. I don't want to let everyone down. And Mike would say, just run it. Run the play. It's my fault. I'm telling you to run it. It will work. This defender is going to do this. It will work. in the game, run it. And more often than not, it has, to the point where that's a trust fall. I mean, if you were to take that anecdote and turn it into a tangible example, that's literally the trust fall. And I think that is a testament. It's if you are in a place where you are struggling mentally, it takes repetition of that type of interaction to keep you away from that place that
and
you
just, and it's just on a pure quarterbacky level, that's what you need. You know, it's such a cliche of just you want someone that's confident enough in what's around him to pull the trigger, which is probably a bad phrase to continue to use in 2024. But Justin Fields, in Russell Wilson, when I was watching them on the All-22 on their Saturday night game, and just throw it, just trust it, just do it. I see you see it too, but you just don't. And it's great how Tua trusts his system more than any quarterback in the league. That's why he gets rid of the ball so quickly, and he has the timing. And so that's one story we'll be watching. We're also going to be watching the top 50 free agents. I'm going to be tracking this throughout the course of this season. So this is out on NFL.com. You can just Google, it's on actually, have I tweeted out? Maybe I forgot to. Top 50 free agents are out there. And I did think it would just be an interesting exercise before this season started to just have some takeaways from the top 50 free agents. So the names at the top, a couple of them are going to be taken off the board pretty quick. Dak Prescott's number one, then CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, then a couple Chiefs offensive linemen, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and it goes on from there. But I thought I would just go with a few takeaways, and you can respond however you want.
Oh, I can. Thank you.
Yes. Wide receivers, a lot of wide receivers this year. It's not an amazing list. I've definitely seen better. Last year was better going into the year. But T. Higgins, okay, got him number 7. Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, Chris Godwin, DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen, and I'll even throw a guy that didn't make my top 50, Mike Williams. Those are guys that I think all have a realistic chance to actually make free agency. Maybe some of them get franchised. I certainly think Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb will get signed in the meantime. But this could be a good year, and it's a big year for all those players to try to make their money.
Yeah, I have Chris Godwin written down here as if the 49ers don't get something done with Brandon Ayuk, sneakily I think Chris Godwin could be a fit there. I also have Minnesota and potentially Carolina, and if he does hit free agency, and I think that could be really interesting. There's no reason to think that Tampa Bay won't want to, if he has the season they think he's going to have, extend him and all of that. But if he does
can they afford him and Mike Evans?
Yeah, and if he does hit free agency and San Francisco still is in this mode of, we're so close. We have to see what happens this year. And then obviously, because nothing has happened with Ayuk yet, you have to think nothing will happen unless it's some sort of an extension at this point. I know
I
is
fully
such
expect an extension.
Yeah, that's just dragged on forever. I would think that what Mike Garafolo is one item left to check on this list, and it's check it, just do it. Get this our long national nightmare, make it end. I think T. Higgins is going to be an interesting one to watch.
An actual free agent. They're just not going to tag him a second time. So yeah, these younger players like him, Deontay Johnson is a pretty likely candidate for the tag, I think, just because of his age. I think he's going to have a monster season. But guys like Stephon Diggs and Amari Cooper, I mean, it's a fascinating year for Diggs because he's playing for a contract.
Cowboys beat writers do think that CeeDee Lamb contract's going to get done. Being around them in Oxnard.
That's why I'm not even Lamb and Ayuk.
Stephon Diggs will be a fun one to watch.
I make these lists and I know that it's going to get decimated pretty soon. The Chiefs, I mentioned Humphrey and Trey Smith. So Creed Humphrey, some people would say he's the best center in football, going to be a free agent. Trey Smith, one of the best young guards in football, he's going to be a free agent. I have Nick Bolton now as the best off-ball linebacker available in free agency. Justin Reed is a free agent on the Chiefs. I have him as the number 2 safety available. Charles Omenihu is also going to be free agent. So just kind of a reminder, it is such a delicate dance for this Chiefs team to keep this team together. But, man, they have a lot of guys coming up, and I doubt they can sign Humphrey and Trey Smith together, or they'll have to choose one or the other.
Just do this.
Yes.
Kansas City Chiefs. As your quarterback gets older and continues to play at such a high level, and you want to keep him playing at such a high level, re-sign your offensive linemen that are good, who are good, Draft skill players, draft running backs, draft. Like that's it. Pay your offensive linemen, draft the rest.
It's more or less what they've done since they.
Yeah, exactly.
They really changed their franchise by drafting Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith.
Yes,
in
drafting
the second and
draft,
fourth round.
You draft players that you think you're going to want at those valuable positions that you think you're going to want to extend on a second contract, and particularly up front when your quarterback is getting older, and probably one receiver. Like I love the projection of Xavier Worthy as the number one out there. I think yourself and the fabulous Nick Shook were talking about that on Monday morning show. Which I listen to because I have no life but to listen to every single one of your shows.
I mean,
Greg.
you should. It's your show too.
That's today.
You gotta stay up to date.
Even though I'm gonna need a confidence boost after the way you open this show today. But yeah, I think that's the thing though, is they're gonna have a quarterback who costs a lot of money, invest in the line, which they've done at that point during the draft, but now they're gonna be able to do via contracts and then continue to draft those types of skill players.
So maybe Joe Tooney comes off the books actually, and so maybe you can get it done. You probably sign one long-term, franchise the other, and hope to get that next contract done.
Quick question for you with Justin Reed, who I think is fascinating, not just because he's a great player, but also the special team stuff. Like with this kickoff, we don't know what we don't know yet, but in a perfect world where this kickoff does actually change some of the parameters and constructs of football as we know it, do you think that there's a little bit more value added long term if this kickoff goes the way that I think us football freaks are?
I don't know if Justin Reed's gonna really have that big of a role. We'll see. I mean, if he's
just a little bump, like couple mil bump.
I think Brett Veach is so disciplined that they don't really pay in the secondary that much.
Right.
And when they do pay, it's guys like Justin Reed and Tyrann Mathieu. When he came aboard, were more like mid to late 20s, and Justin Reed's, case a second or third contract. Do you want to give it to him as he's getting closer to 30? Probably not. I think it's going to be easier to find edge players in this. There's always like good, not great edge players available. Weirdly, like that's a position you can find. So a Chase Young is available next year, and I think could be having a really good season. DeMarcus Lawrence, who's getting up there in years, but is still a good player. Josh Sweat, Malcolm Kuntz, Hassan Reddick's a free agent at this point. Baron Browning, like Khalil Mack. There, you can find some edge players. Tackles a little deeper than normal. Your Rams guy, Alaric Jackson, is one of many guys who Walker Little, Cam Robinson, Ronnie Stanley, Jedrick Wills, all these guys who you would say aren't really top 8 tackles, but they might actually get to the market, so they'll get paid a lot of money. And then cornerbacks a little deeper than normal. Charvarius Ward, Asante Samuel Jr., Paulson Adebo, Carlton Davis, Byron Murphy. But the problem is the ones who are really good this year, they won't be available. That's the thing. Teams are just better than ever at keeping the guys that they want. And so that's the whole thing. It was like, Chiefs have to play a lot to their quarterback. And I don't know. Usually players don't become available unless the teams basically don't really want them.
I'm just saying, pay your offensive line.
Yes.
I
just mean in general.
Take on that.
I mean, if anything, Patrick Mahomes is so underpaid because he's making the same as all these players who aren't nearly as good as him. It's like, why is Justin Herbert essentially the same as Patrick Mahomes? It doesn't really make any sense. So the salary cap helps out the Chiefs. And then, finally, Dak, if he wants to push this, and I think he does, he's going to be the highest paid player in NFL history by far, by leaps and bounds. I think if he gets to free agency, I thought Lamar could have done this, and then weirdly, it didn't really happen for him for whatever reason. But I think Dak, it's just going to be outrageous, and the teams out there, there will be many teams out there that want him. So he can push, and he can just set a totally new boundary of guaranteed money. And I think get like a fully guaranteed 4-year type of contract.
I do have a hot take about this, although it's not really a hot take. It's more like, to me, it seems very logical. Like if you're a team that's not quite 100% sure, like you don't like, for example, you don't have a starting caliber or franchise caliber or on that track quarterback on a rookie deal, for example, or you don't have Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert, those guys. If you're not quite sure who your quarterback might be in 2025, you get on the phone yesterday. Like you start laying the framework to try to, first of all, get Dak if you can before he actually hits the market and the price goes way, way up, and then you negotiate in-house with him. Because once there's going to be a lot of teams who are in this, and let me be clear, I'm very pro player make all the money he can, particularly a player of Dak Prescott's caliber, and leadership, and he's going to lead whichever franchise he goes to, or if he stays, which doesn't necessarily seem like that's likely at this point. Things could change. It could happen.
I think it's like 50-50.
Yeah, but 50-50, I mean, that's like a huge,
yeah.
You just said it. Teams pay the players they want to keep, And so this is going to be really interesting because if you are sort of elbowing around with a bunch of other teams in the same free agency market, I mean, it's great for Dak if that happens. I would love that for him if that happens. But if you're from a team perspective, you're going to try to get this done even before that, by November. And I think that it's
good luck, though. That's tough. He's in the middle of a season, and he'll know. And I bet he already does know, just knowing.
I'm sure he wants to hit free agency, and I would think any player in his position would want to hit free agency. I'm just saying, from a team perspective, there are going to be multiple teams. If he doesn't get extended by the Cowboys, there are going to be multiple teams who are going after him pretty hard. And that's
maybe sooner than later. And we'll see how this season goes. That's going to impact everything. There are teams like Tennessee, Tampa. The Raiders will be interested regardless. Who knows? If the Rams went crazy, it could be a lot of different teams that would be interested. So it's just something to watch, kind of hanging over the 2025 season. All right, let's talk about something that's going to happen before the 24 season even starts. We'll talk about some players we think could be in new places in the matter of the next couple of weeks. We'll do that after the break. Oh, yeah. Back on NFL Daily with Jourdan Rodrigue of The Athletic. And before we get to players who could be on new teams in the next couple of weeks, I did want to ask you, Jourdan, about something you sent out on Twitter Sunday night. So let's bring up the tweet here, Randy. And it was a reminder that Jourdan is an identical twin.
Oh, my God. There she is.
And she
Maddie!
explained her identical twin sister, which I knew about, but I get it had been a long time ago and we didn't know each other as well. And I have to admit, I sort of forgot you're an identical twin, and that she is, what is she? The Ocean X head of science operations. So she is running these scientific adventures to find life force across the globe.
Well, okay.
I don't understand.
I'm going to explain this terribly. I attempt to explain this, and then I check with her if I did it right, which when she and her entire crew listens to the show, they listen to everything that I'm ever on, which is extreme pressure because it's a wide array.
Where are they right now?
They're in right now, although we
looking
might have to,
for what? Doing
we might have to bleep that out because I don't think I'm allowed to say it.
We'll beep it.
Yeah. Right now, they are looking for, and I can't say it, but it's very cool, and you will see the scientific research. They found it. They found the thing they're looking for, and it's very, very rad. And you will see the scientific papers published on this, and also some media content on this. I believe in the spring. So yeah, she is the smartest person I've ever met, and it's pretty cool to know that and to have that. Working in this business.
Isn't that a little bit of a humble brag, though? My identical twin sister is the smartest person.
How? We don't have the same. Do you know how twins work? We don't have we don't share a brain.
Two of my best friends growing up were identical twins, so I know
we don't share a brain.
A little bit of the struggles they go through, which come from people like me that assume, but I just think.
Did you want me to talk about my sister, or just we're going to keep talking about you?
No, let's hear it.
Okay, sounds good. So she's the smart. It's cool when you work in our field. We get to meet a lot of really awesome people, really smart people who run NFL. She is the smartest person I've ever met. She runs the science programming at Ocean X, and for most of the year, she is on board the world's most advanced scientific research vessel. It's basically like a floating, moving laboratory with submersibles, real submersibles, not the touristy ones that you see horrible headlines about, but actual. And they work with, James Cameron and Nat Geo and a lot of the BBC to put out educational programming.
Ocean X Explorers is on Nat Geo, and it's on Disney Plus and Hulu, and you can. And your sister's all over that. I need to check this out.
She runs everything behind the scenes, and so it's a huge testament the things that they can do and the things that they've found. the recent one that I am allowed to talk about, it's on YouTube. You can find it. She was the lead on the team that helped rediscover an ancient species of squid that they didn't think was still on the planet. It was living in a shipwreck. So they went down in a sub and found an ancient squid that was living in a shipwreck. It was extremely cool.
That is so cool, and I love that your thread about it, and
I miss her a lot.
With a dig of that she's a Cardinals fan, and maybe that's why she lives on a ship. So maybe she's not that smart. So we'll be rooting for the Cardinals. Maybe she can make picks or give Cardinals analysis from the submersible.
She did text me. She said it's a scientific ship, not a championship, Jourdan. So that's where she cell phoned a little bit.
I love that, and I'm sort of fascinated by that. I feel like I have.
She's amazing. Go follow what they're doing. They're doing some amazing, important things, and also getting people from diverse communities more involved in STEM and giving opportunities to young people who are interested in STEM and helping them grow through that field. And we need more people involved in that field and protecting our planet. So I
love it. I think you're equally as smart, but I don't even know her.
So super not.
I'm just guessing. All right, I'm gonna test your brains here because we're gonna have a brain exercise in terms of putting players onto new teams, like player movement. What could happen over the next week? Like I said, August 27th is cut down day. We'll start to hear some cuts over the weekend as we get through these third preseason games, some trades. One that I think is very logical, I'm going to throw out first.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go Hassan Reddick to the Bears. I think the Jets are sick of this. I don't see an end to this. There was reporting from Albert Breer that the Bears and the Falcons both had third-round picks on offer for Matthew Judon. So it shows the Bears know that edge position that we've been talking about for them is quite thin, that they were willing to give up a third-round pick. I would rather have Hassan Reddick than Matthew Judon if I had to pick.
I like that. I like the fit.
So I'm just saying, that third-round pick that they were going to give for Judon, let's send it to the Jets. That's what the Jets had sent a conditional one out. So Joe Douglas gets to save some face, and maybe the conditions aren't even met now, so he actually upgrades to a hard third-round pick, and the Bears just continue to go all in.
The only question here, because it makes too much sense, Greg. It really does. The only question here is whether Joe Douglas thinks that saving face on this means winning a standoff, or whether he thinks it means trading a player and recouping something in return. Whatever his definition of it is.
They need edge rushers still.
Yeah.
That's the reason why they traded for him. They lost Bryce Huff. They were still playing Will McDonald, their first-round pick from a year ago, pretty deep into that preseason game. And, they're trying to work him in as a third or fourth. But if he decided that Hassan Reddick really might not show up, that this thing between us is just not going to happen, and the Bears are like, hey, man, we'll pay you and get it done, I think that would be a fun one. All right, you throw out one.
I was actually looking at, and I covered him early in his career, and so I kind of been following along the down year and then also the move to safety. But James Bradbury, I know he's not necessarily a big name, but if we're talking about right now, I did connect him potentially back to Carolina. Even Carolina tried to get Stephon Gilmore. Stephon Gilmore was like, nope, not going there. And I do think that Carolina first of all, they need a lot of players, but they very much need a corner. He's playing safety right now, which shows that they're trying to in Philly, trying to find a fit for him. They're also going to have Cooper DeJean come back. They're going to have some health return and some other players that they're going to want to play. And he started his career in Carolina, and they liked him a lot. They just didn't pay him when it was time to get paid, and there was changing regimes and a lot of things that went into that. But I do think that getting him back at corner, getting Carolina, just something, a player who knows what to do, a player who can play, help. They've got some juice a little bit now with Jadeveon Clowney rushing the passer. So, I think they just need a little bit more help on the backside.
Okay, he's 31 years old. So, yeah, if they gave up a conditional seventh, the Eagles would take it. I don't think he's going to make the Eagles. He just seems like he's at a point in his career. Maybe you get the revival year out of him, but the Eagles don't believe that they could get it out of him. So that is worrisome to me. There's a weird amount of cornerbacks, that are available. So I thought about the Panthers too, because they're high on the list of teams that need corners. But there's half the league needs corners. Cardinals could certainly use a corner. I think the Broncos could use a second corner. Adoree Jackson is not signed anywhere. I thought he was okay last. I mean, I know he was in a tough situation with Wink Martindale's, but he's had some really good years in his career. He's 28 years old. How is he not on a roster? Akella Witherspoon doesn't have a team, as far as I can tell. I think Xavier and Howard might be a little cooked, but I'm surprised that no team's given him a chance. Patrick Peterson is out there. Eli Apple, it gets a little lower on the list.
Some of these guys, though, it's like it falls into a category of you wait until every team is finished cuts, and then you sort of assess the landscape.
But there are some guys out there for teams that are truly desperate. Witherspoon, Adoree Jackson, to me, are guys that can play now for you.
Yeah. Akella played well, especially during the first part of last season for the Rams, super young group. But, I mean, it just basically it blew out his legs, essentially. Like, he was dealing with hamstring issues. I wouldn't be surprised if he's taking his time. He's savvy enough, really smart player, savvy enough to be like, yeah, I'm going to miss training camp and then get picked up by someone who needs help. He's just a really smart player. He could fit into a system really well.
All right, let's try to go with big names here. Jahan Dotson.
This is the one I've been excited for you to bring up.
Well, it's not like it's that original of a thought. He's playing deep into a preseason game, and that's a first red flag. And then the reporters ask him about it, and I was listening to a podcast hosted by Ben Standig of The Athletic, Last Man Standing. Go check it out.
Yeah.
Great.
I was just going to say Last Man Standing. He's got 2 puns.
That's great.
2 for 2 on puns.
And yeah, he expounded on this notion too, that they've been asking the coaches about it, and they won't commit to anything. They're just saying it's a competition. When they ask about the wide receivers, they bring up Alameda Zaccheaus first and De'Ami Brown. So it looks like De'Ami Brown's maybe on the outside, but Zaccheaus is on the inside, and Dotson's a former first-round pick, and that maybe just something hasn't been right with him. It sounded like maybe just like not with the new program. It's a new coaching staff who didn't draft him in the first round. And so I tend to think he's available right now if someone wants to give up a pick for him. Now, how high of a pick will it take to get him? He was a first-round pick there, but they didn't draft him. Would they take a 4th for Jahan Dotson right now from the Ravens? I like that fit.
The Ravens?
Yes. I know those two teams don't like each other, but or they didn't used to, especially when Dan Snyder was there. But let's be real, no one liked Washington when Dan Snyder was there.
Teams that I think could use another receiver. Kind of some interesting stuff happening. I mean, I don't know that he's necessarily a fit in Miami, but some interesting stuff happening with their 3 spot.
Yeah, I think possible.
The Colts, Lions, Bills.
Lions are the other team.
Lions, I think, really, really would like to fit. I mean, you mentioned on your podcast Monday morning, Dan Campbell was like, we really need the 3 receiver.
I know.
Someone come forward.
Dotson would make sense. So Dotson's a guy he's not the biggest receiver, and one of his best traits is like winning at the catch point, which is a tricky skill. And
get him to the Bills then. Sounded
like maybe he lost a little bit of confidence towards the end of last year, but I thought he had a good rookie year. There's going to be a lot of people that had good rookie grades on him. Your friend Ron Rivera drafted him there. Those Commanders teams, they always like drafting their guys way higher than the consensus board had him. So they did take him a little earlier, but people certainly had first-round grades on Dotson. He could be an interesting player. Steelers are obviously desperate for a wide receiver. That's another team. Would they give up a 3rd? It's just not something the Steelers would do normally. I think maybe the Ravens are so good at getting those compensatory picks that maybe they could send a 3rd over for Jahan Dotson and get it done.
Those were also teams, if we go into more of a speed round of maybe not as known names, those were also some teams that I had as potential targets for Tutu Atwell.
Ooh.
He's a really, really fast player. He plays bigger than he looks. He looks small on tape and also in person, but he plays with a lot of heart and blocking, and he's been in this system, so he's had to learn how to block and to kind of make up for some of maybe his size limitations, but he's a super fast player. So I look at teams like Miami. I look at, again, the Bills. I look at the Chiefs. I even look at the Steelers because a lot of the stuff that they run in Los Angeles, while it's not necessarily him cutting through traffic in the middle of the field, it's also eventually him exploiting the middle of the field on some of these concepts. And then I also kind of thought that Brad Holmes might give his old friend and mentor Les Snead a call, but after week 1, Tutu Atwell, the reason I bring him up is because when the Rams are in 11 personnel, their 3 receivers are Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Demarcus Robinson. They also have Jordan Whittington emerging, Tyler Johnson emerging. Those 2 players back up Puka Nacua and or Cooper Kupp. Xavier Smith has really emerged as a versatile speed threat. And Tutu backs up Demarcus Robinson at the X, which is not the high volume target in this offense. It's the Cooper Kupp / Puka Nacua. So for that reason, they've used him situationally to great production, but he's going into his 4th season. And if you're not going to resign him, it just sort of seems like at this point you try to get something back.
Someone in that coaching trio, though, too many of those teams already are deep at receiver. Maybe Miami.
I see it for my, but I do see it for
Miami.
I see it for the Chiefs too, because it's like
they actually weirdly have a lot of receiver. I think they're good.
But if you've got speed, add more speed.
Okay. I could see that.
And then I could also see Lions, but only after week 1 because they play each other.
My issue with that is like other teams will look at him as like, man, that was Sean McVay's guy. That was his binky. Tutu Atwell. He needed to make Tutu Atwell work. And so like if he's willing to give him up, then that's a little bit of a red flag. We need to get Ryan Tannehill to the Chargers. We cannot have Easton Stick playing meaningful snaps. And I know Herbert was back at practice, but just can't happen. It's been a tough preseason for Easton Stick, and he might not be a good fit with Jim Harbaugh, and you can't expect Herbert to be healthy for 16 weeks, so that's what I want to see. Marshawn Lattimore has been out of practice since the very beginning of practice. I have no information on this. If his hip is really that injured, that's a concern, and he won't be very tradable, but there has been issues between Lattimore and that coaching staff. Sometimes you wonder at this time of year when a veteran has a day 1 training camp injury and then is out all of training camp, whether there's something a little more going on. There were trade rumors about him. Then they came into camp saying, we're not going to move Lattimore. He's with there. He would be very attractive to a lot of teams. When he's healthy, he's awesome. I think the Broncos, Sean Payton would certainly love to get his hands back on him. If you wanted to get really crazy, this would never happen. But I've just picked up like a little bit of Sean Payton, like, let's see if Patrick Surtain puts out as good a year as you guys say he is. Like they haven't been that interested in extending him, and he's always just kind of needling Patrick Surtain. I don't think Patrick Surtain would ever be available, but I don't know. Lattimore for Surtain thing.
Sometimes, did we think that Dak Prescott could potentially be available? This is sometimes things happen, things change.
Right. That would have to be if the season probably goes wrong for them. So that's more fantasy. But the Broncos going after Lattimore would make more sense. And to be clear, Broncos fans, I'm not saying they would ever do that. And if they had to do it, if they did it, like you would be getting, Saints would have to be giving a lot of picks up with Lattimore to get a guy like Surtain. But the Saints are a team that don't really care about giving picks up.
They're the F them picks team.
Yes.
I will see Ryan Tannehill
to
the Chargers. I will raise you.
Yes.
Sean Clifford to the Chargers. We're in backup quarterback placement territory.
Why would no one wants Sean Clifford?
Jim Harbaugh recruited him.
Okay.
Do we really not want to? This is for the plot, Greg. Do we really not want to rehash? Do we really not want to rehash absolutely insane Jim Harbaugh recruiting stories, and also get your guy from Tulane? This is for the plot alone. We've said some names.
I would like it. Sean Clifford doesn't seem
Sean Clifford is a guy.
It's too similar to Easton Stick to me. Some other names, and this is more, it's a different conversation, but it's in season. Just some players more to keep an eye on in season that we already mentioned. Nuke Hopkins. The Titans. It's like your team has to go a little wrong for this to be possible. Chris Godwin, if the Bucs went a little bad. Kirk Cousins? Is that a possibility?
Spicy. Very, very spicy. I think that, again, it's a bit of a hotter take here, but I think like what we're so hung up on, and as we should be, by the way, us on the outside, is that the Falcons paid Kirk.
Yes.
And so you're like, well, they paid Kirk. They wouldn't move on from Kirk. The money is the factor here. But they've showed that they do not care about the money, because if they cared about the money, they wouldn't have drafted Michael Penix where they did. And they're not playing Michael Penix in the preseason. I'm not saying that this is a thing. I'm just saying it's something to keep an eye on. And I don't think that we can look at it through the framing of, well, the reason that they would stick with him is because they paid him. I think they already showed you that they do not give a about the money because of the decision that they made shortly thereafter.
Right, and people will say dead cap. Look, they ate the Matt Ryan dead cap. It's not going to get worse than that. And what's crazy is the teams that had the most dead cap last year,
The Bucks,
all made the playoffs.
the Bucks and the Rams. Raheem Morris
and the
was-
Packers.
And the Packers. Raheem Morris was a coach on the Rams team that had like
Yeah.
$80 million in dead cap. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying it's something to keep an eye on, because if you decide you're ready for the next guy, the younger player, and let's say, and I think all of us would really love a fun year from Kirk, especially with that offense. I think all of us would love that. However, if it doesn't happen the way that they envisioned, and he also is not maybe as happy as he thought he would be, I'm just saying, it's like I just don't think the money would be something that would factor into their decision making, because they already showed you they don't care about the money.
I think it's a mid-October conversation, but it's one I'm looking forward
We're
to.
having it now.
We got to do a show on possible trade candidates during the season, but those were just a couple names, and see if anyone else gets spun off. I could see the Cowboys picking up like a running back somewhere. Could they get like Jeff Wilson from the Dolphins?
I like that. We also talked about
Miles Sanders.
Yeah.
Would they ever give up something for A.J. Dillon of the Packers? I think the Packers want A.J. Dillon. Robert Woods or Noah Brown, maybe one of them shake loose from the Texans. Steelers could be a team that goes for them. I had a weird Quentin Johnston for Tyree Wilson. First round picks not going so well. Just trade since Telesco drafted Johnston. I think the Raiders would do that. Tyree Wilson, I think, is a name to watch over the next week of just getting dumped for like a conditional 7th, which is just tough.
It's going to drive Raiders fans absolutely insane watching Tom Telesco make any decision that isn't related to fixing their quarterback situation. I mean, again, we talk about if you don't know who
you got to try to improve the rest of the team.
If you're, I'm not saying he's not going to try. I mean, come on, Gregg. You're being pedantic here.
Pedantic's one of those words I never really know exactly what it means, but it's not good.
You don't need to know what it means if you live it. Yeah. So live your truth. That's fine. So if you don't know what team or what quarterback you're going to have, or if you have questions about quarterback in 2025, if you can't look at your guy right now and say, you are my quarterback in 2025, again, the Raiders should be on the phone with freaking everybody at this point. They should be on the phone to see if Kirk is movable. They should be on the phone to see if Dak is movable. They should be on the phone. I mean, hell, call Jacksonville to see if. Yeah, I know that's crazy. That's crazy. We're gonna pull that back out of universe.
No, that was fun. I like throwing these little names out there, because if we just get one nibble, we get one right over the next week. I'll just remind everyone of it. This was fun.
This is the point of the exercise.
Totally. It's gonna be fun over the next week, and it's gonna be fun this week on NFL Daily. We have Patrick Claybon and Colleen Wolfe coming into the studio for our next show. We're going to talk about things we're unreasonably high on. Why Colleen came up with that topic, I don't. You connect that. Until then, for Jordan Rodrigue of The Athletic, get some deodorant. We'll see you next time.